that in the scriptures today, but that's not the real focus of the scriptures. You know, a lot of people, every time something happens in the Middle East, they have groups. There are some people that I know back from where I came from, and they get all caught up into this stuff. In fact, there's a thing called the Rapture Watchers and the End of Time News and all this, and sometimes you just have to giggle and laugh a little bit because it's kind of comical in a way. But every time somebody in the Middle East looks cross-eyed at somebody, oh, it's the end of time, this is a sign, this is a sign. Or every time there's an earthquake. As a matter of fact, I saw one lady post something about an earthquake. This was a sign of the end of time that happened in Antarctica. I don't know much about Antarctica except there are penguins there, and I like to watch penguins. I think they're pretty cool. They got built-in, tuxedos and all that. They're pretty cool animals. But other than that, I don't know much. But supposedly there was an earthquake down there. Maybe they have them all the time. I don't know. But the guy who was prophesying that this was a sign of an end of time said, nobody's going to tell you that there was an earthquake there. So he, in his great wisdom, had figured out there was an earthquake down there, but nobody else would tell us. I think the Geological Survey would have let us know. Well, Jesus is saying, don't get caught up in all of these little shiny things that everybody's showing you. He says, keep laser focused on the gospel. And he comes out of the temple here. And one of his disciples says to him, as it says, teacher, look at what large stones, and look at these large buildings, talking about Herod's temple. They were all impressed by the temple. Jesus said, you like this building? He said, do you know that there's not going to be one of these stones stand upon another here very shortly? Guess what happened in 70 A.D.? They tore the place clear to pieces, the Romans did. Have you ever heard of the Wailing Wall? That's all that's left. That's all that's left. When you see those people over there at the Wailing Wall going, that's all that's left of this temple. He's saying, don't get caught up in the building. Don't get caught up in its beauty. Don't even get caught up in the worship that's happening here. He's saying, keep a laser focus. Don't be distracted by the building. You think a building can't discourage people and can't get people distracted? I beg to differ with you. We worry about buildings all the time. Matter of fact, I was at a church and they were so concerned about the roof, they about drove me batty about the roof. It was, we got to put a metal roof on. We need to put a shingled roof on. I finally told them, I don't care if you put a grass roof on this thing, just figure it out and put a roof on and let's move forward. I didn't care if we put somebody up there with a 5-gallon bucket running back and forth trying to catch the raindrops. They were getting distracted over stuff that really don't matter. As my grandma Wires used to say, 100 years from now, it ain't going to amount to a hill of beans. We get distracted by all these things. But Jesus says, don't be distracted. And of course then Peter, James, John, and Andrew, they say, Lord, tell us the secrets. They always want to be the in crowd. They want to know the secrets of when all these things are going to happen. Here's the thing. Nobody knows when the end is coming. Guess what? Paul thought it was coming about 2 weeks after Jesus left the earth. He says, we ain't got time to fix nothing. Jesus is coming now. The imminent coming of Christ has been with us for many years. And everybody wants to set up that their time is the time. Jesus said to them, beware that no one leads you astray. Don't let anybody lead you astray. Many will come in my name and say, I am he. They will come and say they are the Messiah, they are the returned one, or they are sent by him to tell you some great thing that's happening. Now I'm telling you, this is where we get into big trouble. All these people trying to figure out the end time, when it's all going to happen. I can just tell you this, there is a resurrection at the end. I don't know when it's going to happen. It could happen 5 minutes from now. It could happen 5,000 years from now. It could happen 5 million years. I don't know. You want to know, go watch one of those channels that I talk about in the upper channels, and they'll tell you, and they're all wrong. Do you know that there's 1/2 hour of silence in heaven, according to Scripture? The only time there's silence in heaven, you don't want loudness, you don't want a lot of things happening, don't go to heaven. Don't go there, because it's going to be a loud place. It's going to be a lot of things happening. And there are some Christians who don't think that Lutherans are going, so when you go by their section of heaven, be very quiet, so you don't want to ruin it for them. I could tell you who they are, but I won't. But just be quiet, because they don't think Lutherans are going anyway. But all these people getting concerned about it. You know what the half hour I think is for? Now, I can't prove this by the Scriptures. And if I can't prove it, and it's not plain, I'll tell you this is just me. But you know what I think's going on? I think that God is giving all of these prophecy preachers time to get all their notes in order so they can burn them because they've all been wrong in the first place. Just burn them up, guys, because y'all didn't know what in the world you were talking about in the first place. Don't let people lead you astray. They will lead you astray, getting you focused on things that don't matter. Well, there was an earthquake. Well, there's earthquakes all the time. Anybody ever been in an earthquake? You ever been in an earthquake? I've been in one earthquake, believe it or not. It was in North Carolina. It was right when I first went to Oregon Church, and I'm sitting upstairs in that granite house, and all of a sudden the earth starts shaking, and it shook that house. There was an earthquake that had happened. I can't remember where it was centered out of, but I had never felt an earthquake. But every once in a while they do happen there. You know, they have the San Andreas Fault down in California. Supposedly one of these days there's going to be a big earthquake there, and California will just drift off out into the ocean. And I don't know if that's true or not, but supposedly the big one's going to come out there. In fact, they're talking about the east, the southeast being a hotbed for earthquakes in the future. I read a little bit about these things, but Jesus said, don't let people lead you astray. Don't let them tell you every little thing that happens. Again, every time somebody looks cross-eyed in the Middle East, oh, it's the end of time, it's the end of time. No. Don't be fooled. Don't let people lead you astray. He says, many will come in my name and say that I'm he. They'll say, hey, I'm the Messiah. Again, we've seen this. You remember David Koresh and different ones who have come and have led many astray. And he said they will lead people astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, there's wars all over the world right now. There's still a war in Afghanistan. We just don't hear about it. But there's wars everywhere. Oh, there's a war right now. You know, when I was in the military, there were people preaching that the end of time was about to come and all these things. And the Soviets, they were the great bear of the East that was going to come in. Well, guess what? The Soviets, they never came in and done that. Not that they couldn't. Now it's China, you know. My kids, it was Islamic extremism, but people will try to lead you astray in many ways through this. Don't let people get your eyes off the ball of Jesus Christ. Don't let them lead you astray. There is a group many years ago, and if you want to know where all this started, this end time stuff, it's called the eschaton or eschatological, okay? So when you hear some pointy head get up there and start talking, oh, the eschatological. It's just a big word that means the end of time, okay? That's all that it means, the eschaton. They want to try to sound like they're smart. Yeah, there is an end time, but where this all started, Paul, the disciples, all of them thought Jesus is coming next week. They have believed in the end that Jesus is coming very soon. But all this stuff that started with this rapture and this tribulation, all this end time stuff, it started in the early 1800s. Yeah. Nobody had ever heard of this before. But there was a man by the name of John Nelson Darby. Then also Scofield, which if you are a good fundamentalist, you are to carry around a 95-pound Scofield reference Bible and beat people over the head with it. Dakes and others grabbed a hold of this, and then it became very popular. Darby. There was a man right on the heels of Darby. His name was Miller. And Miller, after Darby's death, picks this stuff up and he says, yes, I can predict when the end of time is going to take place. He says, I've got it figured out. It was to be October of 1843. I don't know if Jesus came. He might be hiding back there somewhere, but I sure haven't seen him. Then he said, wait a minute, I had a knot and a gazenda out of the way, okay? Because it's a mathematical equation, you know. Again, I'm not smart enough. I can count to 12. The only way I got into seminary is I took my shoes off, counted to 12, and I had to do that. It was not nice for anybody. But if you want to be one of these prophecy preachers, you've got to be able to count a long way. So he says, I messed up. My knot and gazenda was in the wrong place. So Jesus is actually coming in October of 1844. Didn't come in either, did he? Stop listening to people that are going to predict the end of time. There's a great book that was written about this. It's called The Disappointed. And guess who this group, the Millerites, turned into? You ever heard of the Seventh-day Adventist? That's who they turned into. And of course they've got Ellen G. White and Mary Baker Eddy, some people who are of, I'll just say, not very good reputation and all that. But this leads to other groups. And then people pick this up during the Pentecostal movements later in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. The Camp Creek revival in North Carolina and Tennessee, and then Azusa Street in Los Angeles that formed the Assemblies of God. And these people pick it up and it sounds good. One time, Hitler was the false prophet, or the Antichrist. Mussolini was the false prophet, and all this stuff. People do this all the time, and it was revived with the late great Planet Earth that Hal Lindsey wrote in the 60s, and it's kind of been around ever since. But people leading people astray through this, saying, I know when it's going to happen. Some of you should remember this. Do you remember? There was somebody else who tried to do this. 1988. 88 reasons that Jesus is coming back in 1988. You remember that? Yeah, some of you ought to remember it. Then what happened? He pulled a Miller. He said, wait a minute, I had a knot in the Gazenda out of place. I messed up my equation. It's 89 reasons why he's coming back in 1989. Jesus never came back. Sold a lot of books, fooled a lot of people. Again, these things are going to happen. When you hear of wars, they're going to happen. Jesus says, don't be alarmed. Wars are going to happen. He says these things must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation. Nation's been rising against nation since the time of Jesus. Kingdom against kingdom. It's happening all the time. There will be earthquakes in various places. They happen everywhere. I guess they even happen in, down there where the penguins are. I don't know. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs. Jesus is saying, don't get distracted. Keep your eyes focused forward. As for yourselves, beware. Now, he's really getting to them now. This is for the disciples, and it also is a message for us. He says, but as for yourselves, this is present tense to them. Beware, for they will hand you over to the councils, and you will be beaten in the synagogues. It happened. Read the book of Acts if you don't believe me. Read the book of Acts. That's all you got to do. And you will stand before governors and kings because of me as a testimony to them. They did. You remember Paul standing in front of King Agrippa? King Agrippa says, Paul, you almost convinced me to be a Christian. Paul said, I wish you and everybody else, except I don't want you to be in the chains as I'm in. I don't want you to be in prison like me. That's all I wish. And I can't remember who it was said, Paul, much learning hath made you mad. He said he was crazy. Yes, Jesus said all these things are going to happen. Here's the key. And the good news must first be proclaimed to all nations. This is where we've got to keep the blinders on. The gospel must go forward to all nations. Don't get distracted by the shiny stuff. Don't get distracted by all the things that people are saying. Anybody tells you they know the end of time, they are a liar and a cheat and a fraud. They are a Machiavellian and a charlatan. Yes, I know a couple of big words. They taught me at the university. That's all I know, so I'm run out of big words. They're a fraud. If they tell you these things, they are there trying to mislead people. And you know why? Follow the money. They make a lot of money, don't it? A lot of money. That's all it's about. A lot of money. And they influence people. A lot of our foreign policy is influenced by some of this stuff. It is. Believe it or not. So when they bring you to trial and hand you over, Jesus says, do not be worried beforehand about what you are to say. They went to trial. They were in prison for their faith, for spreading the gospel. Now, I am going to tell you this. If they ever arrest me, I ain't expecting this, but if they ever do, here's what I want everybody to do. I want you to hold them up long enough for me to get my color on if I don't have it on. And I want you to call the paper. Because I want that picture in the paper. All right, I want it in the Chicago Tribune. I want it in the Leader. I want it everywhere. They arrested the preacher. And then I want everybody, when they finally get me down to the jailhouse, I want everybody to get a sign. All right, I want homemade signs. I don't want you to print signs. I want homemade signs that say free the preacher. And I want everybody down there marching around, free the preacher, free the preacher. I jest, but you know what? This happened to the disciples. They were imprisoned. It happened to them. But Jesus says, don't worry about what you're going to say in these situations. It'll be given to you by the Holy Spirit. And God did move them. Paul stood before Caesar himself. Others were able to stand in front of kings and governors and everything. Peter and all these people. They were able to give a testimony to God, about God to these people. Brother will betray brother to death. Father, his children to death. Now this is to death. He's saying this is, and it has happened. Go back and look at the history of Christianity. And children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you'll be hated by all because of my name. Christians are hated in a lot of places. I'm going to tell you what. Used to be you could put your little fish on the side of the car, and they quit doing that because some of the little fish ended up places they wasn't supposed to be at. They used to put, I belong to the so-and-so church. People quit doing that with the bumper stickers because those bumper stickers ended up at places that the Christians were not supposed to be at in the first place. That's why they quit it. But it says we'll be hated by all. I'm going to tell you what, there's some places you don't want to tell them you're a Christian. They ain't going to like you very well. They don't like Christians very well in certain places. But the thing is, we must endure, as he says, go through these things. The early Christians did it, and we can do it also, but we must have a laser focus. We cannot get distracted by everybody who says, be laser focused. The purpose of this assembly, this group of people, the purpose is to edify the saints here, but to go forward and proclaim the gospel of the good news of Jesus Christ. Laser focused. Don't worry about that other stuff. We can't stop the end of time. I can't stop it. You can't stop it. We can't stop wars, rumors. I can't stop an earthquake. I can't stop it. Famines. I can't stop famine. Been famines even before the time of Jesus. We've read about it in the Old Testament. I can't stop it. Now we can be part of the solution. We can help in those situations. That we are to do that. Christians should be at the forefront of helping. But the thing is, I can't stop a famine. I can't do that. You can't either. We cannot do any of this. We need to be laser focused. No matter what's happening, everybody's upset about this, that, or the other thing going on. Be laser focused. Preach the gospel. Tell the gospel. Show the gospel. Invite people. That is what we are here for. If we're not going to be disciple makers, might as well just shut down. Make a bowling alley. I guess town needs a bowling alley. I guess we could put a bowling alley in here. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? That's it. Be laser focused. Don't get off track. Don't let them get you off to one side. Be like the horse with the blinders. I want to leave you with this. With two things. Some of you are old enough that you've watched this movie. How many of you watched Gone with the Wind? Have you ever watched Gone with the Wind? One of the great epic movies of all time. There's a scene where Atlanta is burning. And Rhett Butler is going to get Scarlett and the little baby out of there. He gets a horse and a little buggy. And what does he do? The horse doesn't want to go anywhere, and I can't blame the horse. If you've seen them, there's flames there. So what does he do? I don't know if it's a blanket or a coat or what, but he covers the horse, and now he's able to lead the horse. The horse was laser focused at that point, was willing to do the job that he was there to do. That's what we got to be, just like that. And I want to leave you with this. When you get discouraged, when you think that we cannot go forward, remember this. The disciples are fishermen. They are very experienced. They are out on the Sea of Galilee, and they are in a storm. In the middle of the night. These guys are experienced. They have fished. They know what they're doing. They're expert fishermen. This is what their profession was. They know what happens to people on that sea when storms hit, especially, in the middle of the night. And then all of a sudden, what do they see? They see Jesus coming to them on the water. Now, they're not sure if it's a ghost. They don't know what in the world's going on. But all of a sudden, Peter likes to speak out, and he says, Lord, if it's you, bid me or ask me to come out there on the water with you. Now we get after Peter. Well, he sank. Ha, 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 ha. Well, he walked on the water. How many of us ever walked on the water? Jesus said, come on out. Water's fine, Peter. He was laser focused on Jesus. But then what happened? He started to see the winds and the waves and everything. And again, this man was an expert fisherman. He knew this area. He knew what happened. And he knew you drowned, it doesn't end up good. And he sees this, and what happens? He begins to sink. But here's one of the greatest images in all of the Bible. When Jesus reaches down, grabs him and pulls him up and saves him from the sea and the storm. You see, Jesus is there. Don't get discouraged. Don't get distracted. Keep your eyes on Christ.